Hello, and welcome to our online activity, Murney Tower Rocks. Before we dive in, however, we're going to give you a quick glance at the history and surroundings of Murney Tower, as well as some of our favorite spots in the tower itself. This is one of our 4 caponiers, which stand at the base of the tower. These structures are my favorite part of the tower, because even though they are in the basement, the rifle loopholes let in so much natural light. Of course, lighting wasn't the initial purpose of this design. If the tower was under siege, soldiers could shoot through these loopholes to stave off the attackers. If this line of defense failed, the soldiers could then retreat behind this door and continue to fire. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that today. Up the stairs from the basement is the barracks level, where the soldiers would have slept, and across the room are the stairs to the top floor. When our curator, Simge, came to the tower for the first time, she thought that the stairs looked like a medieval castle. This reminded her of her time in Scotland and England when she visited many historic sites from the Middle Ages. There's an interesting difference between this staircase and the stairs Simge might have seen in English castles, though. In castles, the stairs were curved so that a right-handed person's body would be protected as they fought to keep intruders from making their way to higher floors. Here, however, there was the possibility that attackers might scale the tower. This meant that it is actually more likely that the positions would be reversed, with the attacker fighting to make their way down the stairs instead of up. As a result, the stairs curve the opposite way. The stairs lead to our gun platform. While other Martello towers have a gun platform shaped like a cloverleaf in order to house 3 guns, ours is circular and was built to hold 2 cannons, a 24-pounder and a 32-pounder. Only one, this 32-pounder Bloomfield cannon, was installed. It could shoot 2,000 yards and rotate 360 degrees, but in order to shoot the cannon, the tower's roof had to be removed entirely and rebuilt afterwards. Why not just build the tower without a roof? In most countries, this was the case, but in Canada, the harsh winters made a roof a necessity. During our museum assistant, Olivia's first visit to the tower, she was blown away by the roof of the gun platform. Its intricate pattern seemed at odds with the practical, structuralist design of the rest of the tower. In a way, she was right. The roof you see here is from 2003 and is permanent. In fact, while we might think of Murney Tower's roof as a staple of the Kingston shoreline, the roof has changed many times over the years, most notably in 1921, when a storm blew a piece of the roof off, killing a young boy. It was this tragedy that prompted the Kingston community to approve the creation of Murney Tower Museum. Thus, the roof played a crucial role in rebuilding the tower's connections with the Kingston community. Ironically, because of a roof that was built to close the building off to the outside world, the tower grew into a connecting force that brings people together every summer. Now that you're introduced to the history of the tower, we can dive into the activity. First, let's introduce ourselves. Hi everyone, I'm Megan.
And I'm Amy, and we are museum assistants with the Murney Tower Museum. The activity we have prepared for you today is called Murney Tower Rocks. If you haven't already, you can take all the materials out of your bag.
These materials should consist of black paint, red paint, and finally white paint, so you'll get 3 colors in your kit. It'll also consist of a rock and a paintbrush. Now, what activity do you think we can do with these materials?
If you guessed that our activity is rock painting, you guessed correctly. We will be painting our rocks with what our interpretation of what Murney Tower is. So this can be words, it can be images, but you should be creative and do what you would like to do. So for example, I'm going to be painting the Murney Tower right here and making it into a landscape with some snow and some clouds.
And I'll be making my rock Murney Tower, so my rock itself is going to be the tower.
But before we get started, I think that we should go put on some aprons or some clothing that can get dirty, because this project could get a little bit messy. And also, before you open any paint, you should put some newspaper or some cardboard onto your painting station so there aren't any spills. You can pause the video now and go complete these tasks. And we're back.
So now we're all prepared. Okay, before we get started though, I'm going to do a sketch on the paper bag that our materials came in, just to make sure that it works out. As I start this, I've got a question for you, Amy. What's your idea of Murney Tower?
I think Murney Tower is really cool because it's just such a remarkable spot on Kingston's landscape. Like, you can't, it's such a recognizable building that you can't look and think of Kingston without thinking of the little Martello Tower on the water. It's just such a beautiful location, and I love walking past there. And now working here and finding out that we have such a big collection of things. We have over 1,000 artifacts. It's just so crazy, you know? So
Exactly, Amy. And we also have really interesting collections as well at Murney Tower Museum, such as the Gardner Collection, which has Victorian collectibles and household items.
yeah, you know, it's just such a historic place, and in terms of Kingston's heritage. How's your sketch looking, Megan?
Oh, it's looking pretty good. I've got
Yeah.
the tower design sketch out, and I'm ready to start painting.
Cool, yeah, let's get started. Now, I don't know about you, Meg, but actually when I think of a tower, I think of something really tall, like out of the fairy tales. But actually, the Murney Tower looks pretty short in comparison. But when you go inside, you realize that there's actually 3 floors. So the basement is where there's storage for food and all the materials that the soldiers would have needed. There's the gunpowder magazine. There's so much more down there than you would think there would be. There's the caponniers for defensive. Like, I don't know about you, but my basement is pretty empty in comparison to ours. And then there's the main floor, which is where you walk into. That's where the barracks were. That's where the soldiers used to live before it was abandoned. And then on the top floor, we have where the cannon is, the Bloomfield cannon, which can swing in so many different directions. It took 8 people to push it around. It's so heavy, but so cool at the same time. 3 levels.
8 people, that's a lot of people. Thanks for telling us that, Amy. Yeah, Murney Tower really doesn't look like your stereotypical fairy tale tower like one that Rapunzel would be in. But there's actually a similarity between these fairy tale towers and Murney Tower. They're all made out of rock. Murney Tower in particular is made out of this gray rock called limestone.
Speaking of gray rock, I just finished mixing my paints for the structure of the tower. So I'm just going to continue painting on away.
Great work, Amy. This gray rock, limestone, is an incredibly abundant rock in Kingston. You might know of Kingston as being called the Limestone City. This is because hundreds of millions of years ago, Kingston was covered in these shallow seas that led to the rock limestone being created. It's hard to believe that Kingston used to be covered in these shallow seas, as if you look outside, we're definitely not surrounded by sea. There's a lake, but we're not in a sea. But back in time, this was the perfect environment to create limestone. Limestone is created when sand and mud gets put on top of each other continuously over time until they become cemented together, becoming hard as rock. That's why all these buildings downtown are the same rock. Now, you might wonder, oh, but why are all these towers made of rock? What makes it all special? See, rock is important because, one, it's one of the strongest materials that you can make a building out of, especially back in the mid-1800s when Murney Tower was created. Have you heard about the story about the 3 little pigs? The first little pig had a house made of straw, and a big bad wolf came, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew it all down. The little pig ran to the second little pig's house, which was made out of wood. The big bad wolf took pursuit, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The 2 little pigs ran to the third little pig's house, which was made out of stone. The big bad wolf took pursuit again, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he couldn't blow the house down. So he tried again, and he huffed, and he puffed, and it still wouldn't go down. The stone house was too strong. This fairy tale can be used for talking about Murney Tower as well. Murney Tower is a defensive structure, so you don't want the enemies, the potential enemies, to go and be able to create any harm or tear down Murney Tower. You want Murney Tower to still be standing. And rock, like in the 3 little pigs, is the best choice for this option. Second of all, Kingston, as I said before, is a limestone city. There's an abundance of limestone in the region, which makes it a logical choice for the building of Murney Tower. You don't really want to be having to ship a rock from overseas or something like that, and when you can just get it on your doorstep, right? So that's why limestone is so well used. Lastly, back in the day, when Murney Tower, right before Murney Tower was being built, Kingston had a huge fire that wiped out a large portion of its downtown. Now all these buildings were mostly made out of wood, and due to this fire, a law was decreed saying houses have to be made out of stone or brick. No wood houses are allowed in case of another fire. So not only is the limestone for Murney Tower part of the most abundant and also makes sense for strength, but it's also legal. I see, Amy, that actually you finished drawing your structure, you're painting your structure of Murney Tower. Do you want to give us a little bit of information about how Murney Tower was built as I get started on my Murney Tower?
Yeah, for sure. Get started. I mean, I could talk about how Murney Tower was actually the quickest Martello Tower in Kingston to be built. It actually took less than a year. Now, Martello Towers, Kingston is kind of special and known for them because there are 10 total in Canada, and Kingston has 4 of them. So almost half of all the Martello Towers in Canada are all in Kingston. Now, it was actually, like I said, it was built really fast, and actually it was built by soldiers who would later inhabit the tower. So it was kind of like building your own house because they would go live there actually. But unfortunately, they didn't get to choose what the name of it was.
Oh, that's true. They weren't able to do that. See, there's a bit of a confusion when it goes to Murney Tower and its original name. See, Murney Tower wasn't always known as Murney Tower. It was originally going to be called Murray Tower, named after Sir George Murray. However, the land that it was on was called Murney Point, as the man who owned it, Henry James Murney, it was named after him. So, when Murray Tower became the tower on the land, everyone just thought of it as Murney Tower. This led to some confusion, though, as on the actual tower, they already inscribed it as Murray Tower. So, as people started knowing it as Murney Tower, this had to be changed. They did this by just changing one of the letters, one of the R's, into an N. So it now is called Murney Tower instead of Murney. So it's a bit of an amalgamation of the two.
Super interesting. I mean, at least the soldiers, they were strategic with the way that they got to build a tower. So you would think that they deserve to name it. But actually, even though the tower was only armed later, it was built very strategically in its structure. So for one example, it was the walls of the tower are much thicker towards the water. Now, this is for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was built to defend Canada during the Oregon crisis. And all of the attacks on Canada were coming up the river, so from the water. So that's why strategically it had to be thicker towards the water because that's where the attacks were coming from. And also because Canada has crazy weather. I mean, snow, high winds, it had to be thicker towards the water because that's where everything would be coming from. Going back to our conversation about fairy tale towers, I mean, or castles even, like Murney kind of has a moat, but it doesn't have anything in it. It's called a dry ditch. And that was also because if our first defensive measures didn't work, we had the dry ditch because it was so steep, it would be very hard to get into the tower. So yeah, those are just some of the different ways that Murney Tower is built so interestingly. I think it's just so amazing, all the little details there are about it that make it so difficult to get inside if you were the enemy. We should talk about why it's important to Kingstonian and as a Canadian landmark. What do you think, Megan?
I mean, after all, it turned from a military building built for defense into a museum, right? And a little fun fact about that is that Murney Tower is Kingston's oldest operating museum. it was turned into a museum in 1925. And that's a long time ago. Murney Tower actually just celebrated its 95th year. So that's really exciting. So a happy birthday, Murney. And that's actually an idea for painting your rocks, is that you might want to do a little birthday hat or something on Murney Tower to celebrate its 95th birthday.
Oh, that would be so cute.
I know, I'm wishing I did it now. Anyways, talking about Murney Tower, it's actually one of Kingston's UNESCO World Heritage Site, as well as a National Historic Site of Canada. This is important because it's one of Canada's only UNESCO buildings. The fact that Murney Tower, as well as the Rideau Canal and Fort Henry and all the other military buildings in Kingston, made it as one of Canada's UNESCO World Heritage Sites is, in my opinion, something that's worth celebrating.
And a UNESCO World Heritage Site, that basically just means that it's recognized by an organization as really universally having value. And so to have that on the Murney Tower and for Canada as a whole is just so cool. And it just kind of signifies that how important that our structure is, and that it's important to the Canadian identity and the Kingston identity, but also on a world stage.
Exactly. So it shows that not only is Murney Tower important for Kingston, but it's important for Canada, as it shows how Canada became the country it is today.
Now that we're done painting, I feel like we should show the audience what we made. So I made actually a little snowy scene of Murney Tower in the wintertime, because I think it kind of shows how even during the pandemic, which is happening right now, we're still operating and we're still doing a lot of stuff for the tower. Even though we can't be there in person and we can't be meeting with people, we can still be doing things for the tower and for Kingston as a whole.
And my little scene is just of Murney Tower. I made my rock Murney Tower, and I actually painted the sides too to make it more 3D and roundish to emulate more of what Murney Tower looks like and to give it a little bit more depth. So I took the paint Murney Tower as a literal meaning, and I painted Murney Tower onto my rock. So hopefully this gives you some ideas of what to do and for your painting. And if you want to paint more, do words or anything like that. We really ask you to be creative. And if you wanted to do a funky looking Murney Tower, feel free to. We welcome that.
So that is the end of our at-home activity. I know despite the circumstances, we wish we could have been there with you, but Murney has a place in Kingston, but we wanted to bring Murney to you today.
And a note to the parents, if you take a picture of the rock, make sure to tag us on social media at Murney Tower Museum for a chance for us to be able to showcase your work on our social media. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you soon.
Bye.